Hello friends and followers, welcome back to TJ's Modeling Bench. This was going to be the final reveal of the Demon, but I just didn't quite get it done over the last week. I didn't have as much time here in the shop as I was hoping, and I actually had a lot more to do to it to finish it than I thought I did. I don't know, I always get to this point where I think I'm really close to being done, but I'm not really as close as I think I am. So there will be a final reveal later this week, I promise. It will be done by then. But anyway, let me show you what I was able to accomplish this week. I'm trying to finish up all the little details so we can do our final assembly on this. But you may or may not recall in an earlier video, this rear package shelf was black like the other parts of the interior. And the more I looked at it, the more I thought, I think it really needed to match the dashboard top. And maybe it's me, but I think it looks a lot better that way. And then you can also see that I added some speaker grills. Those are photo etch speaker grills. And I always drill a hole underneath, so when it's in there, if you can even notice it, you know, it'll look like maybe there's a speaker cone under there, but it gives it just some depth underneath that screen. You know, whether or not it's visible, I don't really know, but in my mind, it just adds something. So anyway, of course, those are photo etch, and I painted those. First, I hit them with a etching metal primer, and then I sprayed them with the flat red as well. And then I masked off with just little strips of tape to get that accent stripe in there. And I think that turned out really well. So it kind of ties it all together. I think it looks really, really good. You can see our window cranks have been chromed. It's barely noticeable, but right above the red in the black trim there is a little Demon decal on both sides, and that's characteristic of the one-to-one car. Our the subframe, floor pan, frame, chassis. All right, it was all black, and it was just the Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. And the more I looked at stuff online, the more I was like, yeah, it's too black. It needs to be a little more gray. So I got out some, I believe it was German gray from the Tamiya line, and just kind of shot it so you can see it's a little lighter in some areas and darker in others. And then as well, I went in with some AIM weathering powders, AIM, that I bought years ago when I was doing more model railroad stuff, and we just gave it some dirt on the metal frame, you know, the cross frames, the bottom of the engine, obviously, bottom of the transmission, just to dirty it up a little bit, the drive shaft. Now, this drive shaft is molded into the chassis, so it's not a separate piece. And our transmission doesn't quite reach it. So I'm debating whether or not to find a piece of plastic tubing that I can just cut a little wedge to fit in there and fill that gap and make it look like it's one piece. So I don't know, but I mean, if you look at it this way, you can see that it doesn't quite line up with the transmission anyway. So I don't know, I may just leave that alone. And then trying to get the engine in, I noticed that the headers, all right, these support rods that come out from the frame, they actually went out straight and were attached to a block on either side. But that block was interfering with the exhaust on manifolds. So I just snipped out the block and glued these to the side of the framework. I still need to go in and touch them up with a little bit of paint, because you can see the white bare styrene underneath there. But yeah, and of course the fuel tank has been painted. I may still go in and paint a darker color to create kind of that strapping that holds the tank in. I probably will do that. All right, and then the rear suspension and the exhaust, again, done with the AIM powders and a little bit of that German gray. I think that looks pretty well. Of course, here's the rest of the exhaust too. We just hit that with the AIM powders. So something kind of like that. Doesn't look too bad. Now, one thing I noticed, I probably need to go in and mask off and then chrome these tips. So that wouldn't be hard to do. I can easily mask off everything behind there. Spray those with a black gloss and then hit them with some alclad chrome, or I may try that Fusion Firm silver foil because it does look really, really well. So that's ready to go on. Our side mirrors have been chromed with alclad. All right, both of those are done and ready. The windshield. So I always add the factory tint stripe at the top of the windshield. And on this one, I kind of was going with the theme of the car a little bit. So we sprayed this one red. And I think it's also going to work very well with the overall theme. Something else I do with my window glass is I dunk it in the Pledge Floor Care finish. I think it goes by a different name nowadays. I've had this bottle, oh gosh, 20 years or more. So it lasts a good long time. I keep most of it in this little tub. So this is the rear and side window glass. And it's just hanging over the bucket right now, letting any excess drip off while it dries. Now back to the car body. So I don't have very good luck with clear coats. All right, the body itself was shot with Testors Extreme Lacquer. This is their Blazing Black. So it's got a metal flake in it. And even though it's blazing black, because of that metal flake, it almost looks like a dark gray rather than a solid black. But because I used that, I thought, okay, well, let me use the Testors Extreme Lacquer Clear Coat. And this is their Wet Look Clear. Well, the problem I have with using this straight out of the can is that it's hard to spray in light, even coats. It comes out a lot heavier than I would like to spray it. And as a result, I got a lot of orange peeling and fisheyeing. And I have wet sanded this once already. And then, of course, it's still wet because I just rinsed it off. And it hasn't completely dried from being underwater. So I'm going to have to clear it again, obviously. And I'm hoping that what is on there now will disappear under the next coat of clear. Now, it may not entirely, but I'm afraid to sand too much deeper on it because I don't want to get into the color coat. You know, really, especially on this hood, I really don't want to sand and burn through on that. So, you know, and you can see here, I did have to sand that scoop a little bit more than this one. So I'm hoping that all disappears under the clear coat. And if not, oh well, we're just going to have to live with it. I didn't do it beforehand, so I had to do it afterward, but I drilled out the mounting holes. Sorry, let me get in frame. That. So I had to drill out the holes to mount the rear spoiler. And I just got done painting this as well, but the rear spoiler is also the flat red, but the standoffs for it are a flat black. And this is all Tamiya paint. Just like the hood itself was mostly Tamiya, I only used a little bit of the Mr. Color dark clear red. but I think this is really going to look good when it's finished. In order to make our 3D printed wheels and tires fit the model, we have to do some modification to it. And the reason for that is, if you look here, this is the original kit wheels, your outside and then your wheel back on the inside, and the tire would go around those, obviously. But on the backs of all of the wheel backs, you've got this tube or shaft that on the front receives this pin. So this gets mounted to the frame, and then the pin is left for you to mount your wheel and tire to. All right, and then on the back, the rear axle actually has a metal rod axle that goes through the differential, and then they slip on that way. Well, our 3D printed pieces obviously do not have that, but you can see the dimple in it in the back. This is 5/16 outside diameter plastic tube, styrene tubing, and let me get the uncut end. It fits exactly in that dimple. So what we're going to do is we'll cut off a section for all 4 of these and glue it into place. And now it's still a little bit oversized for our pins, but we can take care of that too with I might have tubing that fits inside this that'll still fit the outside of that pin. If not, we'll probably just fill that with some epoxy and then set the model down, and then that axle will ride up to wherever, the top of that as the glue dries. That way all the wheels will be touching the ground. There won't be any rocking of it. Another thing I did to help with our stance, so that we get the rear end raised up just a little bit, I added a little wedge of styrene plastic on each side of this rear axle support. Those get glued onto the frame rail. So this is really just a spacer, but it'll raise that rear axle up and give us just a little bit more, angrier stance, if you will. I still need to paint those, obviously. I'm sure you've all heard of pad printed tires. The tires that come in the kit, and they've already got the lettering on the sidewalls, in white. Well, our 3D printed tires and wheels, of course, you have to paint everything on there. So we've got raised lettering, but it's not white. So the easiest way I've found to do that, and it may still require a little bit of touch up afterward, but this is an eraser, right? And I just cut it off flat, got my flat white paint, it's XF2 Tamiya, and I dip my flat eraser in there, and then I dab off a good portion of it on a paper towel, and then very carefully, keeping it as level to the lettering as possible, we just start tapping it on. And I may have taken too much of the paint off that time. I've had it open a while. It's getting a little thick. All right, so you can see I am going to have to do some touch up, but that's okay. It still looks pretty good. All right, do our radial GT on this side, or TA rather, not GT, radial TA. Now you want to, of course you want to minimize the amount of touch-up you need to do, so you got to be careful how much of the paint you actually get on there. That's why I dab it off so I don't get too much, but sometimes I take too much off. That A doesn't quite look right. Okay, I'm gonna have to do a lot of touch up on that one now. All right, so there's that one. I've already got the other ones done, and you can see, yeah, it really makes a difference. All right, so to do our touch up, I've just got one of these pointy cotton tipped toothpicks. Really, it's really just a pointed toothpick with a little bit of cotton on the end, and then in my cup over here, I've actually only got 91% isopropyl alcohol, and because I'm using the Tamiya paint, it's fairly easy to remove with just the alcohol. Now you see it's creating a bit of a white cloud around there, so it's not getting it off entirely. That's what we can come back with a brush, a small paintbrush, and hit these areas again with our rubber black, just to help blend that blemish in more. But this takes off the majority of it. All right, there's our wheels and tires ready to go on the kit. So be sure to check back in later in the week when I post a reveal video of the finished product. Till then, peace and love.